Well then, welcome everyone. My name's Bob Schlanger. We're excited to have you here this evening joining us, and we're excited to have our panel with us today to share their journey from being a Rice student athlete to becoming a professional athlete. Today's panelists had outstanding careers at Rice, but today we want to focus on their professional careers. We'll touch briefly on their time at Rice and how they were recruited to Rice, and then we'll move on to their professional careers. If we have time remaining at the end of our discussion, we'll take questions, so please feel free to enter your questions in the Q&A section of your screen. Our first panelist tonight's joining us from Melbourne, Australia, where it's tomorrow already, and she is a 2012 Rice graduate, a member of the Rice soccer team, Gabby Garden. Gabby started her professional career in Argentina with, okay, I'm gonna probably mispronounce this, but it was Club Atlético River Plate in 2012. She earned her first senior cap in the 2015 Pan Am Games in Toronto with the Argentinian national team, and she played in the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup squad in France for Argentina. And she currently plays in Australia for the Essendon Royals and is also a part-time goalkeeper coach for that program. There are, I checked online, there are like 750 members of the Essendon Royals, so they're all levels of play. And Gabby joins us tonight from Melbourne. Welcome, Gabby.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Also joining us from his office on the Rice campus, probably doesn't need an introduction, but is Paul Yanish. Paul's a 2005 Rice graduate, a member of the Rice baseball team that won the national championship in 2003, a member of the Rice Athletic Hall of Fame. As an amateur, he was a member of the USA National Pan American team that was a silver medalist in the Pan Am Games. He was, like I said, a member of the 2003 Rice National Champions. And he played professionally, including 9 years in the major leagues with the Cincinnati Reds, Atlanta Braves, and Baltimore Orioles. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Bob. Good to be here.
Next, joining us from his home in Houston is Ricky Pierce. I'd like to complain that Ricky still looks like he could play in the NBA. Ricky's a 1983 Rice graduate, member of the Rice Athletic Hall of Fame. And when you enter Tudor Court and look up, you can see Ricky's jersey. He's retired numbers there in at Autry Court. Ricky was a three-time All-Southwest Conference athlete, Southwest Conference Player of the Year in 1982, and in 2015 was inducted into the Southwest Conference Hall of Fame. He was drafted in the first round of the NBA draft in 1982 by the Detroit Pistons, was the sixth man of the year in 87, and also in 1990 was an NBA All-Star and played 969 games in the NBA, scored 14,767 points. Quite a career. Ricky, welcome.
Thank you, big fella. Appreciate you.
And also joining us from her home in Santa Barbara, California is Wendy Wood Yang, the first great women's tennis player at Rice, graduated in 1986, member of the Rice Athletic Hall of Fame, was a two-time All-American at Rice, first individual to Rice woman to win All-American status. She was three times All-Southwest Conference, Southwest Conference Co-Player of the Year her junior year, and Southwest Conference Player of the Year in her senior year in 1986. She still holds the Rice record for career wins in singles with 147 sets, and she's second in career wins in doubles still. And she played professionally in from 1986 to 1989, played all over the world, played for quite a few tournaments here in the United States on the Virginia Slims Tour, and played at the French Open, Wimbledon, and the Australian Open. Wendy, thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Really glad to have you with us. I want to start first just briefly talking about how y'all ended up at Rice. And I'd like to start with Gabby because she kind of took a detour before she showed up on South Main. Gabby, tell us a little bit about how you ended up at Rice.
Yeah, so you're right. I started my college career at University of South Florida. I grew up in Sarasota, Florida. So when I was looking originally to go to school, it kind of, I don't know, was recruited by USF, who was playing in the Big East Conference at the time. And after a year or so there, I decided that I felt challenged athletically, but I wanted to go to a school that was also going to challenge me academically. And so began looking to transfer. And among a group of schools, mostly in the Northeast, Rice came about. And I still remember thinking, as soon as I'd never been to Houston, I'd never really been to Texas actually before coming to visit. I kind of might have given Rice a short shaft, actually. I wasn't quite interested, but I remember getting the invitation to visit the campus and falling in love with it like from the get-go. I was blown away by the people, by the place itself, and actually grew to love Houston quite a bit as well. So I came to Rice in my junior year, and yeah, I loved it. It was a wonderful experience for me. I loved the university and the challenges that it represented, both on and off the field.
In the same vein, Ricky, you kind of showed up at Rice. I'll never forget an assistant coach telling me, this Ricky Pierce, he's going to be the best player you've ever seen. And that was before that was 2 days after practice started. Tell us about how you arrived at Rice.
Well, Bob, my recruitment was not the standard recruitment. I went to junior college in Walla Walla, Washington, with intentions to transfer to Washington State after 1 year. But it was too cold up in Washington. I decided I wanted to be closer to home where my family could watch me play. And my choice was Southwest Conference. That was my first choice. So I called a couple of schools. I had no takers because I needed more college hours after the transfer, after the 1 year. So I contacted Rice and I talked to Coach Schuler and explained everything to him. So he scheduled a workout with me and his assistant coaches. They came down to Dallas to watch me play. The next day I was on a plane to Houston.
Yeah, I can understand. I talked to one of the assistant coaches after like 3 days of practice, and they said this guy's going to be the best you've ever seen at Rice, and turned out he was right.
And you know, and I got those college hours I needed, and so Coach told me to come on, and so
That's great.
I knew little about Rice, but I had a great time.
Great. I want to move on a little bit. Wendy, you came to Rice from the Northeast. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up at Rice in your recruitment.
Sure. Yeah, I'm from New England, from the Boston area. And when it came time to go to school, you know, I was fortunate and I was recruited by a number of really good schools across the country, and made a visit to Rice, and there was something really special about the campus, about the coach, about the team members that I met. And I really felt like, you know, I was getting the best of both worlds. I was getting the best academics, and athletically, you know, Rice was in the Southwest Conference then, and you could play outside year round, which was something that really excited me too, coming from New England. And so, yeah, so that's sort of how I landed at Rice.
That's great. And Paul, you were right down the street, you know, went to high school here in Houston. How did you end up at Rice? What was the recruitment like? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so being from fairly close, we had a pretty good idea. I had a pretty good frame of reference for kind of the academic side of things, and had the good fortune coming out of high school to be recruited by some other schools in Texas, and also kind of around the country a little bit, some other academic institutions across the country. But I kind of wanted to stay close to home. I love, the weather here, kind of like Wendy mentioned, is conducive. And at the time, Rice was really coming into its own on the baseball front. But the deciding factor for me, and my parents were a big part of this decision, was the academic side of things and the network that I would have access to on the backside of receiving a degree from Rice. So those are kind of the factors for me, and it really wasn't that difficult of a decision. At the time, I had grown up kind of wanting to go to the University of Texas, but relative to baseball specifically, Rice was the only place that was going to let me. Rice was the only place that was going to let me play in the field. Everybody else was only going to make me pitch. So it was those factors kind of all played into it. But that's how I ended up at Rice.
Sounds good. When you were recruited, had Reckling Park, was it under construction or had it just been completed? Or
my freshman year was the first year that we played in Reckling. Yeah. So
yeah, great. It was great. Well, let me ask all four of you really briefly, who was your sports idol growing up? Who did you try and pattern your game after, or who did you admire as you were watching as a young athlete? And I'll start with Gabby.
Oh man, that's a hard
Is that a
question,
fair
I guess.
question?
No, it is. I guess my situation's a bit different because I'm a goalkeeper, but growing up, I idolized the '99 World Cup team, the U.S. World Cup team. I remember as a 9-year-old I wasn't even sitting in front of the TV. I think I was standing within about a meter of the television screen. My dad telling me to back up because I was going to hurt my eyes, but I was so engrossed by watching these women playing in a stadium. I think they were playing in the Rose Bowl in front of about over 90,000 people playing the World Cup final. And just watching the way that they killed it that match. They won in penalty kicks. And I remember just thinking like, I want to be there. So for me, that generation of players, and it's actually across the whole squad, from the goal, from Brandon Scurry to Brandy Chastain to Mia Hamm to Michelle Akers. And it was, for me, that group of players kind of was what made me think, well, I want to eventually get to that place. Like, I love to be like playing a World Cup, get to play and live off the sport that I love. So for me, that was like the core group of players. Then there are players who I admire in terms of like my own game, and I try to model the way I play a bit after them. But for me, like that group was kind of the changing point or the turning point.
That's great. Up. And you ended up playing in the World Cup. So that's awesome. Wendy, what about you? Who did you pattern your game after, or did you have somebody you tried to pattern your game after?
I mean, not so much pattern my game after, but my dad was a professional baseball player. And, I sort of grew up with, that's all I knew. And definitely that played, a huge role in my life, and in looking up and thinking that, oh yeah, this is normal, this is doable, and why not me? And I started playing tennis. And so of course it was, for me back then, we're dating myself, but it was, Chris Evert and Martina Navratilova, and just the strong women that, were overcoming, especially someone like Martina, overcoming obstacles that just were, this was very new to happen. And back then too, it was really women's tennis if you were going to be a professional athlete, that was sort of it. There wasn't a lot of different options. So yeah, I would say my dad was a big influence, most definitely. And then
your dad, I think most people realize that Wilbur Wood was your dad and played for years for the White Sox. And he was not, I don't want to, is this fair to say, he wasn't the most talented athletic player to ever pitch in the major leagues, but he pitched for years because he was a professional. and his approach to the game was, I mean, he started 35 games a year and pitched.
Yeah.
If you look at his stats, I mean, he pitched 25 complete games a year in the majors. Did that kind of rub off on you, his approach to how he approached playing in the majors?
Well, let me just first defend my father's name. Not everyone knows him, Bob. People your age and my age, and maybe Ricky's age know of him. But no, he had an amazing career, and actually, many people would say that he could have played professional baseball, football, or hockey. So he really is quite the athlete.
Oh,
But he was a knuckleballer, and so those aren't the traditional knock him over with heat kind of pitchers. That must be what you meant.
that's what I meant. I did not mean to insult your dad, because when I was a young kid, I tried to throw a knuckleball like Wilbur Wood until I hit my catcher in the face with a pitch once, and that was the end of that. But his approach was always as a professional.
Yes, he was a workhorse for sure. He was a workhorse. He would be pitched, like you said, to two ends of a doubleheader a couple times, and would pitch, on 3-4 days rest. That's how he preferred to play, actually. So, yeah, thank you.
You bet.
Okay.
Ricky,
Yes, sir.
didn't mean to interrupt you. Ricky, who did you pattern your game after when you were, as you started at Rice?
Well, I didn't really model or pattern my game after any particular player, but it's players that I really enjoyed watching when I was coming up. And I would say Jabbar would be probably my number one guy that I really enjoyed watching. And Jerry West and Dr. J. I really got a lot of enjoyment out of watching those guys. I just wanted to be able to approach the game the right way, like those guys. You read articles about them and their approach. And that's the way I wanted, if I wanted to pattern something, I wanted my approach to be more professional and serious, and with the hard work and dedication that they put into their game.
That's great. Well, I want to talk with you a little bit about that here shortly. But Paul, who did you grow up like, and enjoying watching, and as you were starting your career?
Yeah, so like as when I was a young growing up in Houston, probably my favorite player was Nolan Ryan, right? He was and I wasn't a pitcher, but he was more of like a persona, the type of like just tough guy that I really kind of looked up to, I guess, when I was young. As I got older, like into high school and college, the professional player that I probably appreciated the most was Derek Jeter. And obviously a very talented player. I just really took to kind of how well all of the teams that he played on, and obviously playing for the Yankees, there were some resources and whatnot. They had a lot of very good teams, but he was kind of always the glue that kind of held those teams together. And so as I got older and kind of in terms of patterning your game or appreciating the way he went about his business, it probably would have been Jeter. But when I was young, I grew up really liking the Astros and Nolan Ryan.
Awesome. Well, moving ahead, let's talk about professional athletics now. And look, Paul, you were drafted by the Reds, spent a couple of years in the minors, and then in 2008 you went up to the major leagues, and you stayed there for what, 9 years?
Yeah, give or take.
But let's talk about your first game in the majors. If you will recall that game, you actually, it's a very your performance was very notable in that game. And that was, I don't know if you recall the game. I'm sure you do, but
I recall.
the Reds were playing.
I peaked early in my professional career. There's nowhere downhill.
You actually, the Reds were playing the Marlins, and the Reds blew a 6-run lead. And then you came up in the bottom of the ninth.
It was the 11th. We ended up winning the game in the 10th. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you got a walk-off single to win the game, and it was the first player to have a game-winning hit in his first major league game it's only been done twice. It had only been done twice in the National League at that point. Talk to us about what your approach was, what your feelings were when you first played in the major leagues.
Yeah, so it was kind of, baseball's different than some of the other sports in the sense that you do generally spend some time in the minor leagues. And so getting to the big leagues is kind of like a culmination of, a lot of hard work and whatnot and time spent in the minor leagues. But for me, I distinctly, very vividly remembering I was playing very well at the time. And the guy that I replaced the night before, he fouled a ball off of his knee and, had a fracture in his knee. And so I got called up, and it was kind of a surreal feeling, right? That you're going to the big leagues. It was coincidental. My mom was actually at the AAA affiliate at the time. So, which is in Louisville, Kentucky. It's like an hour drive. So we drove up to Cincinnati together. And that next night, I, wasn't starting, came in the game late, which was seemingly a token kind of get into the game and get your feet wet, right? And then ended up getting put into a pretty big spot and getting the big hit. But I just remember thinking, like, the last thing I was worried about was playing, because I was playing really well and I was so kind of locked in, or whatever you want to call it. And it was kind of a cool feeling, because I was hoping to get an opportunity to play or to do something that would, be recognizable in hopes of being able to stay, right? Because at that point, you fight tooth and nail for a long time to get to the big leagues, and then you do it, and you just want the opportunity to kind of show them what you can do. So the one thing that sticks out to me was kind of the calmness that I had at the time, which was kind of, looking back, it didn't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, talk a little bit about what the learning curve was as you progressed through the minors until you entered the major leagues.
Yeah. So the comparison, the professional deal to the collegiate, we had some success in college, obviously, and we had a lot of good teams, and like there was this intense camaraderie at the college level, which baseball specifically, again, you got to go through the minor leagues and you got to grind it out and try to make your way to the big leagues. And very quickly you realize that you're playing in a lot of aspects for yourself. You're trying to figure out a way to get to the big leagues, and if it's either me or the next guy, I'd rather you pick me, kind of thing. So you lose a little bit of that quote unquote team dynamic at the minor league level. You get to the big leagues and then it becomes about winning again. So it was that in and of itself was kind of an adjustment for me, who was kind of by nature kind of a team guy. And but I would say the adjustment is obviously there's the level of play is better. There's no two ways about it. But it just becomes a lot more about being diligent, and like the day-to-day grind was a huge adjustment. And it's just about trying to be as consistent as you can, as opposed to being really good on one given day. It's being good over a long period of time. And for me, that was kind of the biggest adjustment.
Great. Gabby, you played internationally. You went not only from being an amateur in the United States, but playing professionally, but you were in the United States. Now you're playing internationally, where soccer is, as we all know, the sport. Talk a little bit about what you learned from playing internationally when you transitioned from an amateur on the college level in the United States to a professional internationally.
Yeah, so actually in Argentina, women's soccer has just became officially professional last year. When I first arrived in Argentina in 2013, it was semi-pro. So it was kind of like I don't know, they call it like a brownism, kind of like it's a mix between amateurism and professionalism, where there's a lot of gray areas that happen, but a lot of my teammates lived off of soccer. I think for me, the biggest thing was learning that my experiences in the US were exceptional, that most girls around the world don't have the same possibilities that I had growing up to play the sport that they wanted to, especially soccer in Argentina. And it's a very masculine sport, male dominated sport. And I was playing at one of the biggest clubs in South America. River Plate is known globally as one of the most important clubs in the world, and especially in South America and Argentina. But within the club, we were kind of the lowest on the pecking order among all the disciplines. So like I remember kind of the shock going from, you know, playing it. I mean, at a Division I university, it's pretty close to professional level in terms of women's athletics, especially women's soccer. And so for me to go to that club and find myself in a situation where sometimes we'd have to give up the pitch to a youth boys team because they needed it, and we practiced at the same time. We'd have to end up playing in a local park or training at a local park because we didn't have space within the club. For me, it was kind of a shift in terms of how I saw sport, because it was no longer like when you're at university and maybe things aren't going your way, you kind of push through it because you know, okay, well, I'm here, I'm getting my schooling paid for, on a scholarship, so you know, I had to kind of have someone else that's also pushing you, so yourself and others. But as you get to the like beyond college and the pro level, it has to come from you as well, your desire to continue to push through sometimes adverse situations. And I saw that in my teammates, and I think it's kind of when I started to fall back in love with the game. It stopped being, I didn't see it as like a job or like an obligation at all. It was, I really did enjoy every minute that I had on the pitch, because those moments were were valuable. I had teammates that would travel, you know, 2 hours each way to come train on public transport, and they were getting paid maybe $30 a month. But they did it because they loved it, and because they saw the possibility of maybe playing for the national team, which then could open doors to playing overseas. And for me, it was that experience of seeing something different and understanding and getting to see, I guess, kind of passion in another way, like that, you know, people's motivations for doing things go way beyond what's like the economical aspects of things. So I think for me that was massive, and it actually almost, I mean, not almost, it is what pushed me towards pursuing a graduate degree in sociology as well, because it was like, well, what is behind this? What is behind these differences that I see in terms of my own experience in the US, and then what I've seen amongst my own teammates in Argentina? Why do they put themselves through all of this, considering that like they're not, in the eyes of society, they're not extremely valued, but then it is in a way being part of something that's bigger than them. So I think for me, what I learned, especially playing around the world, is what soccer means in different nations. And in Argentina, for young women, it was kind of like a statement of going beyond what's expected of them by the rest of the world, I guess. And yeah, it's been really a cool experience. I was there for 7 years, and seeing the progress from when I first arrived to now, and having a professional league, and that same club where I started, they now have begun to prioritize women's football. So it's been a really interesting experience, and getting to see how there has been some progress made that's difficult, and it's a struggle, which I think is a description of what most women's experiences are in sport at a high level. But you know, I think what makes it kind of special is also knowing that around the world, other female athletes are kind of in the same boat. So there is that sort of sorority aspect that occurs across society. So I think that's been one of the things that I've most enjoyed.
Awesome. I want to turn to Ricky a little bit. I've got to tell a real quick Ricky Pierce story. So in 1982, I was helping out with the summer league we had college basketball players, primarily from Texas, but from around the United States. And there was this guy that was from Auburn, and I think y'all probably know who I'm talking about, but it was Charles Barkley, and he would come and play. And one day between games, he saw my Rice shirt and said something to me about Rice. And I said, yeah, you know, Ricky Pierce played at Rice. And he said, that guy wants to be great. He doesn't want to just play in the NBA. He wants to be great. So that's what Charles Barkley thought about Ricky Pierce, and I'll never forget that. And Rick, you played for 16 years in the NBA at the highest level that basketball can be played in a time when really in the 80s and 90s, the NBA was at the top of its level with Jordan and Bird and Magic. And talk a little bit about what it was like competing at such a high level in so many games for so long a period.
I'm gonna tell you, Bob, it was tough, physical for sure, but we had lots of fun playing. But the biggest issue that I had was the transitioning from small forward to the shooting guard. I mean, the physical part, I didn't have a problem with. The talent part, I know I could play, but that guard position was totally different from small forward. And I came up against guys that been in the league for established players, 5 years, 10, great players. And I didn't know how to play that position. That's what really made it tough for me. But, I stayed in there. I go back to what my mom would always tell me when I would get down on myself, especially my rookie year when I was feeling down, sitting on the bench. Wasn't happy at all, used to playing. She told me, Ricky, stay mentally focused and stay strong. You can get through it. And that's what she told me. So what I did, I went home over the summer and I trained. I mean, ball handling, off the dribble. Matter of fact, I trained one summer with some Rice cross country track guys. And of course, they put me through some stuff. And the only thing they was telling me is, come on, big guy, you doing good. I mean, we were running 400s, 100s. Of course, I could not run them, but I was in the best shape going back into the basketball season. I really appreciated that. And that made me focus on my weight training. So I really got off into the weight training and the physical fitness part during the off season. But it was lots of hard work, especially in the early 80s and 90s. Training camp in the early 80s and 90s was 25 to 30 days. And you're doing tour days now, 2-hour sessions. It was grueling, but it was fun. I mean, I loved it. Once I learned how to play the game, the guard position, it was on then, Bob.
Yep, almost 15,000 points in the NBA. That's a pretty good career. Pretty good career.
Yes, sir.
It was always fun watching you at Rice, and it was great watching you in the NBA. Wendy, let me talk to you a little bit about professional tennis. At Rice, you were a phenomenal college player. I mean, really, you were the best player in the Southwest Conference for your junior and senior year, and you were an All-American. And but you stepped up. Talk about your transition from playing collegiate tennis to playing on the Virginia Slims Tour in the United States, and then playing internationally at the French Open and Wimbledon and the Australian Open.
Well, I think, Paul touched on it a little bit, to the transition from being part of a team to being sort of out there on your own. And that's what I would say I miss the most about college tennis. Even though tennis is an individual sport, you're still on this great team, and it was a real sisterhood, and everyone had each other's backs, and it made an individual sport really a team sport, which I loved, and I think brought out the best in me athletically and in other ways too. And the transition, as competitive and grueling as the Southwest Conference was, the professional ranks, certainly that just the intensity and the depth, as with any professional sport, there's no weak links. And so that, day in, day out, you're not going to get an easy match. And, quite honestly, I didn't have the career that the others on this panel have had. I lost more than I won. And, that takes its toll on you, right? It's just not winning is fun. And no one worries. Hard work is not the problem, but when you're getting knocked down, and you're out there sort of by yourself, it's tough. You learn a lot about yourself, and that is what I'm actually most grateful for. Is I think you do in life and in anything you do, we learn more from our losses than our wins. So how do you learn from your losses but not be defeated by them? And so, I mean, that's life experience right there that I'm super grateful for. Yeah.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about one of your wins.
Okay.
And I watched the last couple of games last night on YouTube. The video was not very good, but the tennis was pretty awesome. And I know you know what I'm talking about, but in 1988, you won 3 qualifying matches and played in the opening round of the draw of the Australian Open. You played the first competitive match ever in center court at the new Australian Tennis Center, which I guess is now called Rod Laver Arena. And you played the top-ranked Australian woman, Diane Fromholz, who I think she was married. Anyway,
yeah.
Diane Fromholz, who was a top-rated Australian player, and looking over her career, I just thought of this, but she had career wins over Chris Everett, Martina Navratilova, Billie Jean King, Yvonne Goolagong, Margaret Court, Virginia Wade, and Pam Shriver, but not Wendy Wood. I think is pretty neat. Talk a little bit about the conditions. It was brutal. It looked like the wind was brutal, and it was as normal. It was extremely hot in Australia at the time, and I don't think it's fair to say that the crowd was in your favor with their favorite Australian player. Talk a little bit about that match on that one day. Talk about
Sure.
That one day when you had to show up and play your best.
Yeah.
You did.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You stayed up late doing homework, because I imagine that wasn't one of the reels that you go back to on a regular basis. So
Probably not.
You did your homework. No, that was a very special, that was certainly the highlight of my professional career. I did have to battle through qualifying and manage to win my way through, only to face, Diane Fromholz, who was the top seeded Australian. And as you say, that was the debut of a brand new stadium for the Australian Open. So they gave her the honors of playing the first ever match on there. In fairness, yes, she was an amazing player and had all those wins. I think I was lucky to meet up with her on the tail end of her career, but a win's a win, so I'll take it. And it wasn't a pretty match. It was incredibly hot, and it was incredibly windy. And, I'm not sure either of us played our very best tennis, but in the end, I found a way to win, and it was a thrill. It was a real thrill, and right place, right time. And also, as Paul said, that ability to calm yourself when it matters most and just let your body do what it knows how to do. When you can let your body take over, you're in a special place, and that always feels really good. So thank you for bringing that up.
You bet. She was at the time, I think she was ranked 19th in the world. She was the 12th seed or the 13th seed, something like that. She was still a pretty formidable foe. At the time, were you traveling with a coach, or were you just traveling by yourself, or how was?
I was working with a coach that coached a number of different women, so sort of by myself, but sort of with a part of a coach. But Australia, as Gabby, that's where she is right now in Melbourne. It's a beautiful place and super friendly people, and a great atmosphere. Great atmosphere.
That's great. I don't think I ever saw you play a professional match in person, but I don't think I missed any of your home matches at Rice. And I was kind of designated to drive groups to Corpus Christi to see you play and all around, but you had a great career, and on that day you were great.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you.
I want to talk a little to, I guess, let me start with Rick. You played years in the NBA. Talk about when you came to the decision that you'd played enough and that it was time to move on from playing in the NBA. Talk about what that decision was like, and what the experience, looking back on it, what the experience meant but towards the end of your career.
Well, Bob, I had a passion for basketball ever since I was a kid, coming up through 5th grade when I first started playing organized ball. And I've always wanted to play each grade level, from 5th, 6th, all the way up through high school, through college. I wanted that feeling to be at the top. I never wanted to end. If it would have ended in high school or college, I would have gotten no satisfaction. So I just had to get to the pros because I wanted to play at the top level against the best players that ever lived. In first 5 years, I didn't have my field. 8 years, I didn't have my field. So I played 16 years and I was tired. I had enough because most of the guys I had played with, they competed against was gone. Dominique Wilkins, those guys was out of the league. And I'm playing against all these youngsters and they calling me old school. But I got a step slower. But Detroit, at the end of my 16th year, they called me and they told me, we want you in Detroit for 17 years. As a role model, they wanted the young guys to understand from talking to the GM what hard work and dedication is about. They wanted to see the hard work and dedication. But Bob, I didn't feel like doing it anymore. I didn't want to be a bad example. And it'll show when you don't want to practice, because every day you have to get out there and bust it. Paul, you guys, Wendy, y'all know what I'm talking about. I mean, you have to bust your tail every day. And so at the end of that 16, I talked with my wife and I told her that was it. I have 3 kids, they growing up, and one of them is a tennis player, matter of fact. He's 22 years old now, and a pretty good tennis player. So I really enjoy watching him play. That's how I get my entertainment now in sports.
That's
But
great.
it was fun. It was fun.
Great. Well, I have some other, I'm only a third of the way done with my questions, but we have some questions to take from our observers. So let me ask a couple of questions here. Gabby, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and you're a part-time coach. Talk about coaching aspiring young athletes.
Yeah, it's something I've actually always enjoyed. Even in college, I was sort of doing some voluntary coaching, mainly with goalkeepers. But I really enjoy working with young people. For me, it's exciting because I think obviously as a coach, you're invested in their performance on the field, but you also become invested in them as people. So I think that's something I really enjoy, especially working with young men and women. I like working with both. And so currently at Essendon Royals, I was working with the youth goalkeeper. So I had kids as young as 8 years old. And then I've worked with some who are more like later teens heading towards looking to play at a more elite level. So yeah, it's enjoyable. It's definitely a challenge as a current player. I had a conversation the other day with a couple other goalkeeper coaches just saying that it's interesting because I teach them and then they can see me play on the weekends and say, hey, she told me to do something similar to that during the week. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think it's a nice way to kind of create a balance as well. I think sometimes as I've seen other teammates who are only focused on their playing careers. And I think sometimes you kind of need an outlet, something that distracts you, that takes your mind off of, oh, that practice, I was kind of, I don't know, I committed these mistakes, I did this well, which is, it's good to have reflection, but I think it's also good to have something that kind of takes you away from yourself, that kind of makes you more other centered sometimes. And I think I'd agree with what Wendy and Paul were talking about, that it becomes it does become very individually driven, because, it's your goals kind of that push you to continue going, I think. But yeah, coaching has been really cool, being able to share my own experiences, but also, learning a lot from the kids that I coach as well. And the challenge of being able to turn knowledge, my own knowledge, and being able to share that in a way that they understand and can take and can grow. And then also understanding that the way that I do things might not always be the best way for other goalkeepers to do things. So finding things that work best for them as well as they grow into their own careers.
Great. Let me ask Paul the same kind of question. Paul, they used to say that Ted Williams had difficulty coaching because the players he coached, he got frustrated because the players he coached couldn't perform the tasks the way he could. Talk a little bit about coaching at the collegiate level, at the highest level, and tell us a little bit about how things are going at Rice real quickly.
Yeah, so, I'm been afforded a pretty unique situation, having played here and then gone and played professionally, and having the opportunity to come back and coach here, which, for all intents and purposes, I didn't anticipate doing. My last couple of years playing, I knew I had to come finish my degree, and fortunately, Coach Graham at the time gave me the opportunity to come hang out with him, and it's been a really, kind of to what Gabby was saying, it provides a completely different perspective, because I came straight from, playing professionally in kind of the last couple of years of my career, really grinding, trying to figure out a way to get back to the big leagues and stay in the big leagues and, make a little money. And it was very much a job. So coming back to Rice was kind of in a lot of ways a little bit of a breath of fresh air, because you see guys at the collegiate level that are very green, and, their perspective on the game is very different. So I very quickly realized that, and it's not just baseball. Baseball's our kind of our vehicle, but at the college level, we have the opportunity to kind of influence who our guys become, hopefully. And I think for me, relative to coaching, that's what I've appreciated the most in the short period of time, in a few years. And again, Rice is such a unique place, and I'm biased towards it. And we're fortunate to get a lot of very talented guys in a lot of different ways. So it's been awesome, to be totally honest with you. I couldn't have really drawn it up any. Like I said, I didn't really anticipate doing this, and it kind of hit me in the face, and I've been really happy, like, just from the whole gig, just being back on campus. Like, it's kind of come full circle. Like the academic people were the same, and I get to hang out with Julie Griswold and Mike Gakel, and it's that type of thing has been pretty cool. But
So
go ahead,
not
Bob.
to interrupt, but when you're coaching, do you ever say, now, when I was on the Orioles, this is the way we did it? I mean, do you ever bring out a major league card and say, this is, if you want to get to where I was?
So I'm a little different than Ted in the sense that I wasn't quite as good as him, but I think that my demeanor is not so much the, hey, do it like I did it. It's kind of the inherent, at least I hope, the inherent credibility that I bring by having played fairly recently. And, so I do think that plays a factor. And I think just from a communication standpoint with our guys, I think it does help me on that front. But I try to be pretty intentional about handling all of our guys individually and trying to, whether it's terminology or whatever the case is, and trying to appeal to them in a way that is, because everybody's different. Everybody interprets things different and hears things different. And some cues work for some guys and some don't work for others. So it's, talk about the sociology experiment, Gabby. That's kind of what this whole deal is all about, I guess. But all that being said, I have really enjoyed it, and we've been fortunate to have a couple of pretty good players here the last couple of years that have made it
pretty good shortstops.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, a couple of quick questions. If you guys can keep your answers short, we've got way too many questions to address. But first one is for Ricky. Ricky, talk about the adjustment from being a starting player at Rice, a star at Rice, to becoming a sixth man in the NBA. And you obviously made that transition fairly well because you were sixth man of the year 2 times in your NBA career. But talk a little bit about what it was like making that transition.
Bob, it was a lot of fun. I mean, like I said earlier, it wasn't easy. Learning the guard position, but I feel the love of the game, and I had great coaches, especially Don Nelson. He really made it a lot easier for me to transfer my mentality from with my back being to the basket and facing the basket. You know, it's 2 different positions, but it was fun and I had a great time. I mean, and you know, my coach, Mike Schuler, he was also with me in Milwaukee. So that helped a lot. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that helped a whole lot. He and I spent some time after practice. We was going over some guard moves.
Yeah, I remember many times after games, after watching a game, we'd go grab something to eat and come back, and Ricky'd be shooting in Autry Court for hours and hours. I don't think anybody worked harder than Ricky. Hey, Paul, here's a question for you. And towards the last few years of your career, you played for the Orioles. Was Cal Ripken around at the time, and what was his influence? And talk a little bit about him.
Yeah, so he was around still a little bit. Yeah, so I did have the opportunity to meet him and be around him and kind of get to know him a little bit. And he's a pretty lighthearted guy, pretty funny to be around. And it's relative to Baltimore in that area of the country. He's like a cartoon character, right? Like I don't think he's paid for a meal probably in 30 years, but he was a really good dude, really good like influence, and he was you know, very approachable. So yeah, that was pretty cool experience, because even growing up, I wasn't a huge Orioles fan per se, but definitely as a shortstop, he was kind of one of the first guys that was like a bigger bodied shortstop and pretty well known.
Yeah, I mean, playing in the major leagues, does it give you more respect for him playing 2,100 games in a row or whatever he did?
I'm you know, no offense to any other sport, I don't have as good of an idea. I think that might be the one record in modern sports that I don't think it has a chance of being broken, just because of the way the game is played and handled now. It's literally not real. I don't even understand how he managed to accomplish that.
Yeah, he didn't miss a game for like 15 years.
Yeah, really tremendous feat.
Well, we know what Paul's doing. We know what Gabby's doing. We know Ricky's here in Houston. Wendy, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and where you are, and talk a little bit about
I'm my family and I have been in Santa Barbara, California for the last 5 years. We moved out here for me to take a position where I'm leading a couple brands. One is Teva, the outdoor sandal brand, and the other is Hoka, which is a running shoe brand that some of you may have heard of, and having a lot of fun with it. Have some great teams, and we're adjusting to life and conducting everything on Zoom calls like everyone else these days. But yeah.
Sounds good. I don't want to pin you down, but when are you going to come back to Rice and watch some women's tennis? We've got a great program. And
I know. I was back a few years ago with some of my teammates, Susan Rudd, Tamara Ray, Juana Hadnot, and others, and had a great time. And as a mom who has had 3 daughters, you know, go through the whole college thing, being back on the Rice campus, like, wow, there's no place like this. This can compete with absolutely any other college or university. I'll be back as soon as I can. Yeah.
Sounds good. We'll be waiting for you. I really want to thank everybody. We've got a couple more little questions if I can get. So talk about, Gabby, I'm going to have to leave you out because you're still playing now, but Wendy, do you still play?
A little bit.
You enjoy it? Do you, I mean, you play for the enjoyment, obviously not
Yeah, yeah. You know, Sue Rudd and I played platform tennis and played some tournaments for a few years, which was an absolute thrill. So another racket sport, and the skills translate, and just fun to be sort of back together. And I miss competing. You know, it's fun to go out and hit a ball, but I really do miss competing. And so anyway.
Great. Ricky, you ever shoot free throws?
Yeah, I still shoot free throws a little bit. I mean, I do some individual training, you know, with some young kids and a couple college kids I've trained. And yeah, so I still get out and shoot a little bit.
So if you show up back at Rice, what do you think? You'd average 35 a game or?
Well, Bob, I'm gonna tell you, with the way the rules are set up now, you can't touch no one. You watch NBA games. It's a lot different from back in the 80s and 90s. I would love it. I'm telling you. I would love playing in the league today.
Sounds good. Well, I want to thank everybody. We've used up our hour. We still have a bunch of other questions, but I think that will do it for this evening. I really appreciate everybody talking with us. We'll have another couple of programs coming up in the near future, and maybe when the world gets back to normal, we'll see everybody at Rice and enjoy some more college athletics and some more professional athletics. So I want to thank everybody. Gabby, have a good afternoon. Everybody else have a good evening. And thanks again for joining us, Paul, Wendy, Ricky, and Gabby. Thank you for talking with us about your professional experiences. We appreciate it.